So without any further delay, I would like to introduce one of our stellar MFA students who will introduce tonight's reader. Please welcome Erica Hughes.
Thank you all for coming. I just want to start off with how unworthy I feel to introduce Mai Der. I just finished reading her book, and yeah, it's mind-blowing. As a Black American, I am often overwhelmed by both the history and the present affliction of my people. And as a woman, my already overwhelmed state is compounded by the heinous crimes that patriarchy insists on subjecting women to. Thus, as a woman of color and as a poet of color, I'm usually at a loss as to how to make sense of these heinous crimes against my humanity, against my people's humanity. In her debut collection and the winner of the Walt Whitman Award, Afterland, Mai Der Vang reflects on the crimes inflicted on her people, the Hmong, and deciphers meaning, shapes and molds truth out of that affliction. In this collection of lyrical poems, Vang confronts war, being a refugee, one's relationship to her people, one's relationship to the land, and so much more. Afterland is shocking, poignant, mystical, but more importantly, truth told from a people pushed into history's secrets. In her poem, Cipher Song, Vang writes, "Our bodies will be books." Certainly in this collection, Vang has reincarnated her ancestors and enshrined the lives of the Hmong in this book of poems. As a woman of color and as a poet of color, I cannot help but applaud at such wonder, at such a revolutionary collection of poetry. With pleasure, I introduce to you Fresno's own Mai Der Vang.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Erica. All right, what a beautiful audience! Wow, this is incredible. Thank you for being here. It is great to be reading poetry on a Friday night, Cinco de Mayo, and there's so much happening on campus too, I hear. So, and earlier, the Levine Room dedication too, I heard was also another well-attended poetry event as well. So it's like a Poetry Friday in Fresno, right? So I'm going to be reading from my new book, Afterland, and Afterland came out in April. And we had the launch event for it, and I see a lot of faces here who were also at the launch, so it's really cool that you came back. Something went right, so that's a good sign. But thank you for being here, and I'm really excited to share some of this work with you. I think, Jefferson, is there time for a Q&A too at the very end? Okay, well, and and thank you so much. First and foremost to Jefferson, who is just this amazing person who is doing so much work behind the scenes and all this coordination, and so much of this wouldn't have happened without you. So thank you, Jefferson, for everything that you do for the program, and I'm grateful for your leadership and your work. So I'm going to share poems from Afterland, and when I was working on this book, I've had a lot of people ask me questions about the fact that whether or not I set out to write the poems I wrote, and the questions are always difficult to answer because I never intended to write this work as it is now, and so it's sort of something I'm still thinking about is how these poems came to me. And I'm going to start with the poems that have to do with the war and the Hmong involvement in the secret war in Laos. And I'm going to start with a poem. And this poem has to do with my grandmother, who had this obsession with Sylvester Stallone. And I like to read this poem and open with this poem just because it's my grandmother. And I think her obsession was really rooted in the fact that she would watch Rambo and Rocky, and she would see Rambo in this landscape that was very familiar to her. so that resonated for her. This is a poem called Matriarch. She points at the television as if she could translate Rocky, make sense of Rambo. She is camphor blouse grandmother, keeper of jars for flamed cuppings. She knows where men have been, those falling into tarnished landscapes, sinew machine built from fire as if coal were burning their insides. Rocky's arms draw skin drip of diamonds in the meat locker. Rambo is carnage cloaked in her homeland mud. She knows them as one, their howling stare before they yield the way their eyes turn lunar, rogue as dead stars thrown back to the graveyard in heaven. In the afterwar, there are no more terraces, no more hills, no hand to sweep the hearth, but always there remains a man omitted, and that she knows as well. This next poem is about my mother and a story that she shared with me about the war. Her and her sister, they were in the middle of running and fleeing Laos, and her sister had to separate. So what she did was her sister took off her jacket, and at the time, it was a traditional Hmong jacket, and she gave the jacket to my mom in case they never met up again. And so years later, I was with my mom in her room, cleaning out the closet, organizing things, and we opened this suitcase, and there was this old, tattered jacket in there. And I asked her about it, and she said, well, that's the jacket that your aunt gave me in case we never saw each other again. And so she had this relic of the war tucked away in the suitcase, and so I've thought about that jacket quite a bit. And they did reunite in the refugee camps, but the jacket stayed with my mom still. This is called Tilting Our Tears on a Pendulum of Salt. You must take the hidden road for your way out of these bitter woods. I will go another route. No more do our nail banks lie down in milky water. Let us make our separate ways until we meet our body's dusty gallery, hollow-eyed, until we've passed the troops who have set our forest table with tracheas. Our howling knees are empty, home wages ear-splitting nightmares. I keep your torn jacket, talisman of escape, sweetly clutched as a guava from our childhood. When I see you again, we'll build refuge from newest boughs, like the praying mantis who sinks into frigid leaves. So, I feel like the concept or the idea of home has always eluded me in the sense that home for me in the literal sense is here, Fresno. But home for me in the collective sense of a Hmong American is not clear because, Hmong people don't have a country of their own. And so, we have Laos, a lot of people identify with Laos as the place of belonging or the place of collective history. But still, it's always something that I've thought about in my writing. And so I write a lot about home. And this is a poem called Toward Home. Say a rooster is my mother. Say there is a coffin in its body that can only fit my skull. Say I find a lighthouse burning in a cave. Smoke above the field of broken feathers. I'm flightless, slipping windward without a bridge to home. Say the oven is a bone room. Say the rock bleeds out its boiling eye. I don't know where I'm from, but say my feet endure because I must have come from somewhere. Say the oryx is a creature made of windows. I look inside its ear and I see its spirit. 1,000 needles thread the ends of my hair and I am trembling in the storm. Okay. So I grew up here in Fresno, and I grew up, I guess, central Fresno. And you know, as a poet, I feel like my childhood home is always a place that haunts me. I don't know, how many of you guys think about your childhood home a lot? Yeah, right? And especially if you're a writer, it's something that you know, your memories, your most formative years were there. And so, so I think about my childhood home a lot. I actually live really close to it still, so I can drive by and look at it. But that home, you know, someone else lives there now, and they've totally redone it. But my backyard there was really not a backyard. It looked out over into this lumber yard, which was like this abyss of just wood and nothing. And I remember as a child, I would climb over this ledge so that I could see over the fence, and there was just really nothing to look at. And I thought about that backyard, and this is the poem that came from it. Beyond the backyard. Light passing through geometry of chain link gate. Wig of barbed wire. All I might see. We pay our rent to the mechanic next door. He's industry too. Someday, I will forgive dirt floor alleys with dumpsters everyone used. Forgive forklifts crawling in the lumberyard. Forgive acoustic winds lashing open the back door, anchor let go. I will climb on the ledge to peer over, beggar my eyes to a view. Rusted sedan, wire zip line to stapled roof, retired shopping cart missing wheel. My parents fled for this. Okay. Couple more poems. So, I really appreciate, Erica, that in your introduction you brought up the poem Cipher Song, and I think that, you know, that poem I think is so important to me because it's a poem, like when I think about sort of a lot of the poems in the middle section of the book, and I think about the fact that, you know, as a Hmong person, we didn't have, or Hmong people didn't have a written language until the 1950s. What did that mean for me as a writer to come from a culture or a community that did not have a writing system, nor did we have a definitive literary tradition. And so, you know, how do I confront that today, right? So I think about that, and Cipher Song is actually a poem I wrote that has to do with the, you know, in the old days, what Hmong women would do is they would sew symbols and objects onto clothing so that the Hmong people could retain their history, right? It was one of the ways in which the history could be remembered is through imagery on clothing. And also it was a way to sort of do it and not be persecuted at the same time, because Hmong people were being persecuted at that time too in China. And so, so the ciphers on the clothing were a way to record and document our history. And so this is a poem called Cipher Song. It's come to this. We hide the stories on our sleeves, patchwork of cotton veins. Scribe them on carriers for sleeping babies. Weave our ballads to the sash. Forge paper from our aprons, and our bodies will be books. Learn the language of jackets, the way a pleat commands a line, the way collars unfold as page. Sign our names in thread. The footprint of an elephant, snail's shell, ram's horn. When the words burn, all that's left is ash. guys doing okay? Yeah? I think I'm going to do some more poems too that sort of explore that part of me and my unlettered self. Where is this? And so, as I mentioned earlier, Hmong people didn't have a writing system until the 50s. And so most of the, pretty much everything, the culture, the rituals, the stories were all passed down through oral tradition and through storytelling. But in the 1950s, there were Hmong people who were trying to develop a writing system. And there was a man named Shang Lu Yang who had these visions. He had these dreams about a script. And in the dreams, he would start trying to learn the script. He said that these two men would come to him in these dreams, and they would start teaching him this mystical script. And the idea was that he was supposed to go and teach the Hmong people that script so that they could become a lettered people. But this was all happening during the Vietnam War, and then years later he was assassinated. And so I think that that's always haunted me, is his story and what he was trying to do. And so this is a poem that I wrote, sort of thinking about that. And in this poem, you're going to hear some Hmong words, and the translation of those words immediately follow. And you'll also hear sort of the tonal differences in the Hmong language. Mother of people without script. You swear the twin spirits taught you to write. At night, you climbed the leaves to hear the gods. Catch in the throat, hollow breath. Ba is not ba, is not ba. Blossom is not blanket, is not help. Ndu is not ndu, is not ndu. Edge is not sky, is not wet. On sheet of bamboo with indigo branch, to tzia is not the tzia. To scissor is not the cold. The obsidian mask will make its own sleep, leave behind the silver your body won't shed. Now you are an Indau who was once a young farmer, scrawling in secret toward the triggering day. When they could take no more, when all that you had was given, you lined your grave with paper. So, sort of staying on the war a little bit. During the Vietnam War, Laos was, there was a lot of covert activity happening in Laos with the CIA, intrusion into the country and recruiting of Hmong boys and men. And Laos, as a result of the war, suffered the most bombing, and I think it, as it stands today, it's one of the most heavily bombed countries in the world. I think there were 2 million tons of ordnance dropped on Laos, and most of that came from the United States, sadly. And so this is a poem in which I sort of think about that, and I think about the statistics of the fact that, if you factor out, if you sort of do the math of 2 million tons, it comes out to about a plane load of bombs every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 9 years. Those are the statistics from Legacies of War about the use of ordnances in Laos. And so this is a poem called I, the Body of Laos and All My UXOs. It's been 40 years of debris turning stale, and submunitions still hunt inside the patina of my mud. I'm stumbling with ankles steeped in my little wrecked chimneys, a foot wedged inside a sandal. The bandage wraps my chest, and I sense the new branches of a cypress within me, waiting to tear open the gauze. Where are the high verandas that once guarded elephants? What ends the deepening numbers, resounding into night? A plane load releases every 8 minutes forever. Left only with cistern walls dismantled in this era of widows. This is no way to be lived, clawed and deveined by steel splinters concealed
The ground knows more than a child will ever. No way to seal the gaps when a smuggled climate spills over my body, taints me with cobwebs spun from overseas. Okay, let's see. So, what I've been trying to do in some of my poems, I think I've shared this with some people, is that there are poems in which like I read them and I'm like, where did these images come from? You know, and I question that. Like I never saw myself thinking of some of these phrases or images, but for whatever reason they're here in the book, and I really love the poems in which I sort of challenge myself and I push myself to write really odd and strange and uncanny things that I normally would shy away from. And so this is a poem. I'm gonna read the poem. This is the poem I think where I felt like I almost had a breakthrough, a creative breakthrough or an aesthetic breakthrough, in which I just accepted the fact that I could do this, and I gave myself sort of permission to be a little weird. And let's see if I can find it. Okay. Where are you? Okay, this is called Diadem on Lined Paper. I saw you first as a man whose left arm was the branch of a tree. Your frail stretch no thicker than fingers on a ginkgo, a body meant for downfall. Then you turned over and became a tree whose branches were the arms of a queen, spanning before me like a bridge, earthen silk consanguinity, love that works without a thumb. I took to you my birth, my almond song, chrysanthemum spun into corona and gold. Before morning, I gave you memory of blossoms, carried your scapular weight. You learned me, I did not walk, but my feet did. When fire set itself to expired sleepless nights, I uprooted you from a grave to mark my body mourned. Okay, I'm gonna do a couple more poems. Yeah, okay. I'm really challenging myself today. I don't know if you realize, but I'm reading poems I normally haven't read. They're a little scary because this is the first time you're reading the poem and you don't really know what to say about it. So hopefully it's all coming together for you guys. Okay. Okay. This is a poem about letting go. It's called This Heft Upon Your Leaving. I peel to the center for the shape of an answer to give you, for the way an answer cures in wet resin, or can hook through the days toward the pendulous blink of your eye. I answer as air answering a clapper against edges of bronze before belting out an anthem of 1,000 grazes, until I hear paper stones fall at your softening window. Years ago, it seemed we were strands swept from our ways, two vestigial selves to hide behind. Only the smell darkened when we washed our hands in a brew of cardamom and clove, and your arms blushed over me in earnest. I tell to your thick listening as the mouth to a sudden ear, to your shimmering heat as it condenses around me. Now what century fell down at your door? What cold bowl of oats did you repurpose into blessings? From the kettle tongue, take my answer as a sun-hatched shadow slipping to meet your palm inside the vapor of our moment. Take this entire autumn of waiting. Be held by the sense of an answer, the way an animal can sense where the rain will fall. I think I'd like to close out with a couple poems that sort of explore the part of Afterland that I think that sort of was what I was doing when I first thought about this collection, and that these are poems that explore having grown up in a family that practiced shamanism, and my family still practices shamanism. We did not convert to Christianity, and so I'm shaped by the experience of having grown up, and my mother always telling me, don't trip on the floor or else your spirit's gonna fall, and then we have to call it back. And it was very normal, to literally and figuratively believe that if you fell on the floor, your spirit was gonna fall. And then, usually what happens is, and if this happens to my little nieces or nephews, is what we have to do, right? We have to call his or her spirit back and say, that's not where you belong, go back into your body. And so I'm shaped by those experiences. And I think that's why in some of my poems, I'm thinking both literally and figuratively at the same time. And I guess that's where a lot of the surrealism comes from too, is this seeing of these two different, ways of both literally and figuratively. And so this is a poem called Dear Shaman. Dear Shaman, I'll never smell your mud, never catch trance, though I've swayed to reveries by a quivering pine. Rooster feathers attached to a satellite fly out of my prayers. I've stalked the dead who shake your curtained eyes, thrown wax, a ghost to harden enemy wind. Soulsmith, carve your way in chorus with quartz. Instruments guide on all sides of the sky. Thumb bells, rattle drums, split horn egg, ladder unfolding as a bridge. I've watched you ride away on a timber horse to the Afterland. Monsters sprout from gun holes in people's heads. I cannot look past the prairie to know what moves inside my nightstand, but I've dreamt of slipping transparent, chasing smoke to marry my spirit's name. I'll know the ancestors have stopped to rest when the swallows rise to sing. I'll know the contour of my home by every muscle it holds. It's a photograph graying after each flash. A man falls gossamer until his face folds away. He is already at dark's door when you find him, crossing the equator's end without feet or cranium or lung. Swaying torrent cannot wash him back. On the day of my birth, you rode into my tomb. You knew my death before I could meet my name. Oracles dismantled, but reassembled like bone puzzle. In voyage, kin souls came to you. A murdered uncle tempted you with tears you almost wanted to stay. I think along those lines, growing up in a family that practices shamanism, we have to do this annual ritual where we feed our ancestors, and so that it's a way of remembering one's lineage. And so this is a poem in which I write about that experience, and it's almost kind of weird because it's literal and also very figurative too at the same time. It's called The Spirit Meal. It's been 100 years since their last morsel. No honey on palate, they hunt the living in dreams. Now the dead come to dine in my kitchen. Paper plates line the floor, each offering rice and boiled meat from the hen mother butchered in the garage. Spoons have been dispersed, the ground table is set. As though sounding a dinner bell in the hereafter, Father chants, "Come eat." As though they enter in procession to sit at their chosen plate. Father pours a shot of rice wine, incense fills the air. I picture an opened cupboard in the sky where the feeding hand reaches down to find their waiting mouths. They trudge as the famished turtle whose flaccid head is ready to break. Grains and poultry turn molasses on their tongues, dripping as flame syrup off the chin until their filled liquid faces burn away. Okay, I think it's cool. More people. Come on in. All right, so I gotta read more. Oh, I feel like I gotta keep going now. Okay, I'll do a couple more. You guys can just move my bag. Yeah, somebody has to sit there. Okay. So this next poem, I grew up here in the Central Valley, so the landscape of the valley is figures quite profoundly in a lot of these poems, this next poem that I'm going to read is sort of an elegy to my late grandfather. I think what I was thinking about when I wrote these poems was I was thinking about him and the complexity of being born in one country and then being buried in another, knowing that you can't return to be buried in your own homeland, and you're sort of adopting the soil and the grave of this country. And so this is a poem in which I think about that. So there'll be, and also for Hmong people, like I know for my family, the landscape of the valley is really what draws, which sort of draws and resonates for them because it is sort of a reminder of the land that they left behind. And so this is a poem called "Your Mountain Lies Down with You." Mourn the poppies, the mangosteen and dragon fruit, but you come as a refugee, an exile, a body seeking mountains meaning the same in translation. Here they are. Place your palms on the grasslands, feel the foothills rise with gray pine and blue oak. Here, rest not by the lotus of your old country, but with carpentarias and fiddlenecks of spring. These woodlands may be unfamiliar. Their sequoias thicker than bamboo, and the rains unable to assemble monsoons. Still, look out to the distance from where you lie. You will see Mount Whitney is as beautiful as Pubia. The moon is sharp enough to cut your ears, the one from your village. And notice how these budding magnolias gesture like the petals on a dakchampa. Is that the jungle flower you plucked when you fled? The one you cradled all the way to the ghettos of St. Paul where you first settled? You cried every time you saw its picture. Grandfather, you are not buried in the Green Mountains of Laos, but here in the Toll House Hills, earth and heaven to oak gods. Your highlands have come home, and now you finally sleep. Okay, I'll do like maybe 2 more cells. Okay. And let's see. Let's read something I've not read before. Okay, so this this next poem, this is based on something that I was doing. I was doing so much research, right? Because part of writing poetry is like researching and trying to learn as much as you can about who you are, and I would search these like archives of these Chinese books and archives and try to see if I could find the word Hmong in any of those books and see what I could get from that. And I came across this particular anecdote in this book about a Hmong woman who, during the wars with the Chinese, she defended this fort by herself. All the men had been killed, and so this is a poem called I Am the Whole Defense, mid-1700s, southwestern China. Lightning is the creature who carries a knife. 2 months now the rains hold watch. Statues bury in teak, smeared with old egrets' blood. I feel the pulse of this inferno, tested by the hour to know that even torches must not waver. In the garrison, I teach boulders to trickle from the cliff. My fallen grow parchment from their hair. Calligraphy descends from their lips. Infantry attack, but my musket knows. They scale the sides, yet I tear the rocks. I am not wife, but my name is widow. Let them arrive to my ready door, the earth I've already dug. Okay, last poem. Fair? I need a break too, guys. Okay, we're getting there. Okay, so this last poem, I feel is more of like a meditation, a very incantatory, warlike, thinking type of poem. And it's a poem I like to end on because I think that it was one of the first poems I wrote too when I was working on this collection, and it really, for me, it kind of helped set the tone for me. The sort of not the anger, but the sort of the energy that I was wanting to sort of create for the collection. And it's called Light from a Burning Citadel. And there will be some phrases that you hear that are in the Hmong language. And if you hear those phrases, they basically translate as, we are Hmong, we have always been Hmong. Okay, so light from a burning citadel. Once this highland was our birthplace. Once we were children of kings. Now I am a Siamese rosewood on fire. I am a skin of sagging curtain. I am a bone of bullet hole. I am locked in the ash oven of a forest. Beya, and we will be. The sky sleeps quilted in a militia of stars. Someone has folded gold and silver spirit money into 1,000 tiny boats. Beya Hmong, and we will be. I am hungry as the beggar who cracked open a coconut to find the heart of a wild gower. Hmong, and we will be. The tree is more ancient than its homeland, shedding its annual citrine as hourglass dripping honey. Being iti Hmong. I dig and dig for no more roots to dig. I soldier with my severed legs, my fallen ear. I've become the shrill air in a bamboo pipe, the breath of an army of bells. Thank you all so very much. And is Jefferson around by any chance? Well, I guess there might be time for a couple questions in case anyone wants to know anything about me or about the writing. Yes, right there.
So, in the poem here, Soldier of the Secret War, we read it in class, and I detect some regret and remorse with Hmong participation in the Secret War of Laos. And it gave me a sense of relief, as a Laotian, because a lot of Hmong narrative representation, it has been at the expense of Lao representation. So I wanted to know your take on that.
Yeah, I feel like the poem, when I was thinking about the poem and why I wrote it, I think oftentimes when we talk about the Vietnam War, we hear a lot about the American soldiers who returned from the war and who suffered tremendous trauma as a result of that. But we don't often hear the narrative of the Hmong soldier or the experience of the Hmong. And I think you can even,
there's a way in which you can even transfer the experience of the Hmong soldier into the Lao soldier as well. And so, the whole poem was like my attempt to really try to offer a different narrative, to sort of explore the perspective from the Hmong soldier, and to speak to that kind of trauma as well. But I think that there's a way in which that trauma is shared amongst some of the other Laotian ethnic groups too, like the Mian, the Khmu, the Tai Dam. I think that there were many people, many ethnic groups like the Hmong who were also, we were all running from the same thing. We were all, and there's solidarity in knowing that we all suffered in the same way. So I hope that the poem can speak in a way that is sort of collective too, to the ethnic Laotian experience, if that makes any sense, That's a great question, though. Thank you for having that observation of the poem. Okay, maybe like 1, 2 more questions? No? If there are no questions, that's totally cool too. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So your collection taught me a lot about the imaginative leap, and I'm curious if when you started out writing, and I think you may have referred to this a little bit in your reading, did you start off writing or thinking that your collection would be completely literal, or did you after writing, after beginning the process, realize that it would have to lead more into the metaphysical, surrealism?
Yeah, that's a great question about craft. I really didn't think that I was going to be, leaping so figuratively. But one of the great things that I learned when I was in when I was writing these poems, especially, is, and when I was thinking about sort of the war and about my relationship to it, and what I was still trying to figure out for myself, the questions that I had about it, the sort of the anger that is still sort of the tension of that war that is still very much there. I thought about ways that I could express that, and I could have done it very literally, yes. But as I mentioned, I grew up in a family that practiced shamanism, and to think figuratively was a natural instinct for me, right? To see the world in a figurative way, to see the essence and spirit of things around me, was something that I feel like I grew up around. And so I feel like the connection to the figurative was very natural. But no, I did not go into this thinking that I was going to write figuratively or have all these weird, crazy leaps. But something I really learned and began to embrace when I was writing these poems was to just be okay with being weird, and to push myself to try, to push myself to find those moments that surprise. And I think those are the moments, like when I think back to a lot of these poems, there are specific moments where I look at the Linus and I remember how much that surprised me when I wrote it, because I didn't think I didn't know who that had come from. So yeah, absolutely, I didn't, surprises are unexpected, right? And so it's pushing myself to kind of be surprised and be open to surprise and be willing to embrace what is strange and disturbing sometimes. Yes?
Would you be willing to tell us about how you learned or discovered that you were a poet?
Oh, how did I learn or discover that I was a poet? I don't know, but I grew up, I think I've shared this in some readings, I grew up in a family of nurses. So all of my sisters are nurses. There's actually one right there. And so for me, I was the only one who did writing. It was sort of like a weird thing. I grew up in my summers, I loved to read books. I go to libraries, I would check out books. A lot of the times I didn't find anything by a Hmong author, and that always bothered me, that I couldn't find books written by a Hmong person who could speak to the experiences that I had growing up. And so the writing has always stayed with me. I always did really well in writing growing up.
And it was, and then sort of like in my middle school years, I started experimenting with poetry, you know. And like most people experiment with poetry, it really is just the cheesy love friendship poems, you know, the ones you write to secret admirers or whatever, right? Those were the poems I started writing. And now they've ended up as Afterland, right? So that's how I got my start. That's the honest answer, yeah. I think we may have time for just one more question. I don't know. Sure.
Will that work? Okay, yeah, I don't want to tell you how to write poetry, but don't
No,
worry.
please.
I think you ought to, and discussing the situation that the Hmong people and the Lao people faced during the Vietnam War era. You ought to, emphasize more that there were a lot of different outside entities that had
Yeah.
geopolitical schemes,
Oh, yeah.
and there was the Soviet Union. I actually read a couple things before I came in here, and I found out that I never knew this before. There were 320,000 Chinese soldiers who served as support troops in North Vietnam. They weren't involved in the fighting, but they were support troops. There were actual Soviet military
Right,
personnel there. There were communist insurgencies in
Yeah.
every country, and that was the background of it. And,
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point about sort of
Yeah.
these exploring the war, like sort of from a comprehensive
Yeah.
global point of view, and
Right.
there are a couple poems that I do that in, and my hope is like the work of writing never ends, because you're always thinking about these things and thinking about your next poem and what you're going to write about. So yeah, I'm thinking about a lot of those topics you just brought up.
Although the bombs were American bombs.
Yes,
Let's not
they
forget
were.
that. But they weren't. They were aimed at the logistics of the North Vietnamese army. They weren't really aimed at you, but they fell on you anyway.
They sure did, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hence the reason I'm here. Yes, I think I don't know how we're doing on time, but with two more quick questions?
I wonder, did you have any significant influences or mentors along the way on your journey to becoming a great poet?
Oh, absolutely. This is work that you cannot do by yourself or alone. I think some of my earliest mentors were my middle school teachers. I don't know if anyone here teaches middle school. I know that middle school is often the most challenging to teach, but I had this amazing English teacher who really saw my potential. And I think we had done some testing, the school standardized testing, and she saw my scores and she said, wow, this is really unusual for a refugee girl. Well, she didn't say that, but I knew that's what she was thinking. and so since then she took me under her wing, but that was great. I needed that. I got exposure to UC Berkeley. That's where I ended up doing my undergraduate, because she had gone there as well. And I think that's what started it for me. It was just someone willing to take me under their wing and see that I had potential. So she's probably one of my earliest mentors. I can share. There are a host of others too. Absolutely. You have one question? Last question? Yeah.
Good evening, Ms. Vang. My question concerns about shamanism, because I'm also a fellow practitioner. And as my older brother once bitterly remarked, that he said that shamanism is on its last legs, because the shaman does not get paid for doing a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that shamanism will end in the 21st century for Hmong Americans?
That's a very good question. I don't have the answer to that, but I think that that we live in a very confusing time, and for me, I can speak to myself personally that there is a way in which I have sought comfort in the principles of shamanism, in the belief and understanding of my ancestors and their stories and the lineage in which I come from. and the way in which, there's an appreciation for the body and the spirit and the caring of the spirit once that spirit enters the afterlife, that we're constantly caring for that spirit and that our children will care for us someday. That is the hope that is what would be, for many people who are still practicing it would want to see continue. But it is, a lot of people say it is very elaborate, it's very intricate, there's a lot to remember, the rituals are very complex, and it does require a lot of energy and labor to continue to practice it. But I think that there's yet hope still, and I think, I feel like me writing about it and sort of trying to explore it hopefully will get people to be thinking about it in a very critical way. Yeah. Thank you all so very much. This was amazing. I hope it's okay, but I'd like to take like an audience photo. Is that cool? Because it's just amazing. This is incredible for Friday poetry, Okay. All right. I'm going to try to get everyone in here. Okay, one. Okay, all right. Actually, Anthony, you want to come do it because your hands are much longer than mine. This is my partner, Anthony.
And also, don't forget, Heather's the Musical is happening right now through the 13th.
Okay, all right. You have to turn it around. Okay, all right, here we go.
Okay, here. I'm not in it. I don't need to be in it. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Everybody make noise. Come on. All right.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. I will be outside, available to sign books if you'd like to get a copy, and just talk and hang out. So thank you. Have a great night.